I was standing at my grandfather's grave in the rain, holding the only umbrella I had brought, and my brother was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, cocktail in hand, watching the clouds below him like they were a painting. I found out where he was from a stranger, a distant cousin who had seen his Instagram story, a photo of a blue pool, a sunset, and the caption, "Finally living." My grandfather had been dead for 6 days. The funeral was that morning. The inheritance transfer had gone through 4 days before that, and I was the one standing in the mud trying to hold myself together while a pastor read words over a casket that I had chosen and paid for while my brother chose Bali. Before this story goes further, I want to ask you something honestly. If you had done everything, planned the funeral, managed the grief, handled the paperwork, stayed behind, and someone in your family had taken the money and fled to a vacation, what would you do when they came back? Would you open the door? Would you cover their rent? Would you stay quiet again? I want to know what you would do, because what Ackles did took a different kind of courage than most people expect. Stay with this story. Ackles was 31 years old when her grandfather died, and she was the only one in the family who had visited him every single week for the last 2 years of his life. Not because anyone asked her to, not because anyone told her it was her job, but because she loved him completely, simply, without any expectation of reward, and because she knew, somewhere in the quiet part of herself, that time was running short. Her grandfather, whom she called Grandpa Saul, was 79 years old. He had spent his working life as a carpenter, a modest and careful man who built furniture by hand and saved money the same way, deliberately, $1 at a time. He had never been wealthy by any real measure, but he had been patient, and patient people sometimes die with more than anyone expects. Ackles had known about the inheritance in the most general sense. Grandpa Saul had mentioned it once 2 years earlier during one of their Thursday afternoons together. He had said simply that he had set aside something for the two of them, meaning Ackles and her brother Marcus. He said it without drama, the way he said most things. He told her not to make it a big thing. She didn't. She went back to listening to him talk about the oak table he had built in 1987 and the smell of cedar in winter. That was who Ackles was with him. She wasn't there for the money, she was there for him. Marcus was 27. He was Ackles's younger brother by 4 years, and the distance between them had always felt wider than that. Marcus had a talent for appearing at the right moment and disappearing during the hard ones. He had a way of making his absence seem like someone else's fault. When Grandpa Saul's health began to decline, Marcus had visited twice in 18 months. Once at Thanksgiving, when the whole family gathered anyway, and once in January briefly for about 45 minutes, long enough to eat a sandwich and promise to come back soon. He never came back soon. Ackles had watched that pattern for years without saying much. She was not the type to force a confrontation. She was the type who kept showing up. When Grandpa Saul passed in late October, it was Ackles who got the call at 6 in the morning. She was the emergency contact. She had filled out that form 2 years ago quietly because someone had to. She drove to the care facility alone, sat with him for a while after, and then made the first call to her mother, Donna. Donna cried and said she needed a moment. Ackles gave her several moments and then gently began asking about who needed to be contacted. She was already in problem-solving mode, not because she didn't feel the grief, but because she had learned long ago that in this family, if she didn't do a thing, it usually didn't get done. The next few days were a blur of decisions. The funeral home needed to be chosen. The burial plot was already arranged. Grandpa Saul had handled that himself, thankfully, but there were still costs associated with the ceremony, the casket, the flowers, the order of service cards, the catering for a small reception afterward. Ackles made the phone calls. Ackles drove to the funeral home. Ackles sat with the director and chose the casket in a room where every single option felt impossible. She chose something dignified and middle range because that was what he would have wanted. She put it on her credit card. She called Marcus the morning after Grandpa Saul passed. The call went to voicemail. She texted. She said, "Grandpa Saul is gone. Funeral will be Saturday. Please call me back so we can plan together." Marcus replied 4 hours later with 2 words, "I know." That was it. No call, no question about what needed to be done. No offer to help carry any part of the weight, just those 2 words in silence again. Ackles told herself he was grieving in his own way. She had spent years telling herself versions of that same excuse on Marcus's behalf. She was very good at giving people the benefit of the doubt they had not earned. She kept moving. She had a funeral to organize, and she was going to do it right for Grandpa Saul because he deserved right. The inheritance came up 2 days before the funeral. The family attorney, a quiet man named Gareth who had handled Grandpa Saul's affairs for 15 years, called Ackles to let her know that the estate was very straightforward. There was no house. Grandpa Saul had sold that 6 years ago when he moved into assisted living and used a portion of the proceeds to fund his care. But there was a savings account. He had saved carefully over many decades, invested modestly, and left behind an amount that surprised the whole family, just over $140,000 divided equally between Ackles and Marcus, $70,000 each. Gareth told Ackles this over the phone in his measured, professional voice. He explained that the transfer process would move quickly since the accounts were already designated, and that both parties would receive their funds within a few business days. Ackles thanked him and sat quietly for a moment after hanging up. She was not thinking about what she would do with the money. She was thinking about the credit card balance she had just run up on the funeral expenses, and she felt a faint, complicated relief, not greed, just the practical comfort of knowing she would be okay. She called Marcus to tell him. This time he answered immediately. That detail would stay with her. Through all the days of silence and two-word texts, he answered on the second ring when she mentioned money. She gave him the information Gareth had given her. Marcus was quiet for a beat, then said cheerfully that was great news. He said he had some things he needed to take care of. Ackles said she did too, starting with the funeral on Saturday. There was a pause. Marcus said he was trying to figure things out. She asked if he would be there Saturday. He said he would try. The call ended. Ackles stared at her phone for a long moment. She told herself he would be there. She had to believe that much. Whatever else Marcus was, whatever pattern he had shown her over years, she could not make herself believe that he would miss his grandfather's funeral. That was a line she thought no one crossed. She was wrong. Saturday came gray and cold. October in the Midwest carries a particular kind of grief. The sky goes the color of ash and the trees let go of everything they have been holding, and somehow that fits. Ackles arrived at the funeral home 40 minutes early because that was who she was. She stood at the entrance and greeted people as they came in. Neighbors, old family friends, people from Grandpa Saul's church. A few of his former colleagues from the carpentry shop he had worked at decades ago. She shook hands and accepted condolences and made sure everyone felt welcomed. She was the host of her own grief. Marcus was not there at the start. Ackles kept telling herself he was on his way. She kept her phone in her pocket, checking it quietly every few minutes. No message, no call. The service started. The pastor spoke. Ackles sat in the front row next to her mother, and there was an empty seat beside her, the seat she had held for Marcus, which she had quietly told the usher to save. It stayed empty through every word of the service, through the music, through the moment she stood up and read a short piece she had written about what Grandpa Saul had meant to her. Her voice only broke once. She put it back together. She sat down. The seat was still empty. At the graveside, the rain started. Ackles stood at the edge of the canopy tent they had rented because she had thought to rent one, holding her umbrella and watching the casket be lowered. Her mother was crying softly next to her. Other family members stood quietly around them. And somewhere in Ackles' mind, underneath the grief and the ceremony and the careful composure she was maintaining for everyone else's benefit, a small and clear thought was forming. He is not here. Not late, not stuck in traffic, not struggling to hold himself together somewhere alone, not here. She found out the truth from her cousin Lion, who had been scrolling Instagram at the reception afterward because Lion was 22 and uncomfortable with silence. Lion made a small noise, not quite a gasp, more like a quiet, confused exhale, and she tilted her phone toward Ackles without saying anything. On the screen was Marcus's Instagram story, posted 9 hours earlier. A bright blue infinity pool overlooking green terraced hills, a drink on the edge of the pool. His feet stretched out in the water, and the caption, "Finally living." He had tagged the location, Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. Ackles looked at that photo for a long time. She was aware of Lion watching her face. She was aware of the sounds of the reception around her, people eating and talking quietly and telling stories about Grandpa Saul. She was aware of the casket in the ground 50 yards away. She set the phone down gently on the table and picked up her water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. Her face did not fall apart. She had long practice at keeping her face from falling apart. But inside, something shifted. Not cracked, shifted, like a door that had been stuck for a very long time finally moving on its hinge. She didn't say anything to her mother that day about Bali. Her mother was fragile with grief, and Ackles was not going to add this to her plate. She drove home alone, sat in her car in the driveway for about 10 minutes, and then went inside. She opened her laptop. She looked at her credit card statement. The funeral had cost her $4,220. The money she had spent on flowers alone was more than most people spent on a nice vacation. She looked at that number for a while, then she made herself dinner and went to sleep. The next 2 weeks were quiet and odd. The inheritance arrived in Ackles' account, her $70,000, exactly as Gareth had said it would. She moved it carefully. She paid off the credit card balance from the funeral immediately. The rest she put in a high-yield savings account because Grandpa Saul had taught her to be careful with money. She did not spend it frivolously. She did not celebrate. She was still grieving, quietly and thoroughly in the way that people who keep moving do, in small pockets of stillness that come without warning in the middle of a grocery store at a red light in the shower. Marcus had still not called. He had been in Bali for 11 days based on what Ackles could piece together from his Instagram, which she had checked exactly once more before deciding not to look again. She had seen enough: a cooking class, a waterfall trek, a sunset dinner at what looked like a very expensive restaurant with candles in glass jars on the tables. He was spending freely. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had made a very calculated decision and was enjoying the results of it. Ackles thought carefully about what his decision meant. He had known about the inheritance. He had known when it would arrive. He had chosen to take his $70,000 and leave the country within days of their grandfather's death rather than come to the funeral. And he had done it without one word of explanation, apology, or acknowledgement. He had simply gone, and he had captioned it "finally living," as if the money had freed him from something. She wondered what it had freed him from. She wondered if she was part of whatever that was. She thought about calling him. She drafted the message in her head: "Marcus, I need you to know that you missed Grandpa Saul's funeral. I need you to know that I paid for all of it myself. I need you to know how that felt." But every time she started composing it, she stopped, because she already knew what would happen. He would apologize in that particular way of his, warm and vague and unbothered, and then redirect the conversation to something else, and within 10 minutes she would be the one reassuring him. She knew the pattern too well, so she did not call. She waited. He came back from Bali on a Wednesday. She knew because he posted a photo at the airport, a selfie in front of a departures board, captioned "home, I guess," with a slightly tired smile. She saw it because her cousin Lion, who had apparently not unfollowed him, sent her a screenshot with no words attached, just a screenshot as if to say, "You should know this." He called her 2 days later. She answered on the third ring, giving herself exactly that much time to decide. She decided to answer because she needed to know what he was going to say. She thought he might lead with an apology. She underestimated him. He started the call cheerfully. He said he had been meaning to call. He said Bali was incredible, she should go someday. He said he had needed the trip badly, that things had been really heavy lately. He used the word heavy. Ackles sat on her couch and listened to him use the word heavy to describe his emotional state in the same month their grandfather had died, and he had been photographed with his feet in an infinity pool. She did not interrupt. She let him talk. He eventually said he had got back and was dealing with some stuff, rent mainly, and that things had gotten a little complicated financially while he was away. She asked him what he meant by complicated. He said he had spent more than he planned. He laughed a little when he said it. He said he had kind of gone a little wild, but he was back now and getting his head straight, and he was wondering if she could help him out short term. He said short term in the way that people who have never paid anyone back say short term. He mentioned rent specifically. He said his rent was due in a week and he was about $500 short. Ackles was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, calmly, without heat, "Marcus, you took your inheritance to Bali while I was burying Grandpa Saul." She said it once, clearly and directly, the way someone states a fact they have decided to stop pretending isn't one. Marcus was quiet, then he said he hadn't really seen it that way. She asked him how he had seen it. He said he had needed to get away. He said the grief had been overwhelming and he had processed it differently than her. He said he knew it looked bad. He said he had meant to reach out before, but things got complicated. He said he was sorry she was hurt by it. He said he was sorry she was hurt by it, not that he had done something wrong, but that she was experiencing a feeling. It was a very specific kind of apology. Ackles had heard it before from him. It was the apology that blamed your reaction rather than acknowledged an action. She said, "Marcus, I spent over $4,000 on that funeral. I was the emergency contact. I was the one who chose the casket and ordered the flowers and wrote the program and stood at the grave in the rain. You were in Bali. You had just received $70,000 from the man whose funeral I was paying for alone." She said it clearly, not loudly. She let every word land. He said he hadn't known she had paid for everything herself. He said he had assumed the family handled it. She asked him how the family was supposed to handle it when the family didn't know what the family needed because he was unreachable. He went quiet again. She could hear him breathing. She could feel him recalibrating, searching for the angle that made him look less like what he was. He said he would pay her back. He said he would pay her back the $4,000 and the rent money together. She asked him when. He said when he got back on his feet. She asked him what that meant given that he had $70,000 less than 3 weeks ago. The silence that followed that question was the most honest thing he had offered her in years. She told him no. She said it simply. She said she was not going to cover his rent. She said she had used a portion of her inheritance to pay for a funeral that he had not attended, for a man who had left them each an equal share of everything he had saved, and she did not think it was her responsibility to cover the consequences of his choices. She said she hoped he figured things out. She said she was here if he wanted to talk about Grandpa Saul. Then she said goodbye and she ended the call. Her hands were steady. That surprised her a little. She had imagined this moment, some version of it, so many times that she thought it would feel more dramatic. It did not feel dramatic. It felt like setting something down that she had been carrying for a very long time. She sat there for a while. Then she made tea and called her friend Dara, who had known Marcus for years and had been careful never to say anything directly negative about him, out of respect for Ackles. Ackles told her the full story. When she finished, Dara was quiet for a moment and then said, "I have wanted to say something about him for about 4 years." Ackles laughed, the first real laugh she had had in weeks. It felt like a small release of pressure. She didn't expect the Marcus situation to escalate. She thought he would go quiet, maybe feel some shame, maybe resurface in a few months with a fresh start. She did not expect what happened next, which was that he called their mother. Ackles found out when Donna called her the following Sunday, her voice careful and strange, clearly scripted by someone else. Donna started by asking how Ackles was doing. Ackles said she was doing okay, still grieving but moving through it. Donna said she knew it had been a hard time. Then she said gently that Marcus had talked to her and that she was worried about him, that he was having a rough time and that family needed to look out for each other. She said, "Your grandfather would have wanted you to look out for Marcus." And there it was, the name, Grandpa Saul, used not in love but in leverage. Ackles recognized it immediately, the way you recognize a move in a game you've seen played before. Someone had coached her mother to say that. She knew exactly who. Ackles took a slow breath and said, "Mom, I organized Grandpa Saul's funeral. I paid for it. I was the emergency contact. I was the one who stood at the grave. Marcus was in Bali on the inheritance money. I'm not going to pay his rent as well." She said it without anger, just clearly. Her mother was quiet for a moment, and Ackles could hear the conflict in that silence, the pull between what she knew was true and what she wanted to believe about her son. Donna said, "Ackles, he's your brother." Ackles said, "I know, and I love him, but I am not his financial cushion for the consequence of things he chose freely." Donna said she just didn't want the family to fracture over money. Ackles said the family had already fractured, that it had fractured the moment Marcus chose a vacation over a funeral, and that covering his rent wasn't going to unfracture anything. It was going to teach him that consequences don't apply to him as long as Ackles is around to absorb them. Donna went quiet, then she said she understood. It wasn't a full capitulation, Ackles didn't expect that, but it was something. It was her mother hearing her, truly hearing her, maybe for the first time in a long time on the subject of Marcus. The next contact from Marcus came not by phone but by a long text message. He sent it late on a Tuesday night, the kind of hour when people send messages they have been composing in their heads for days. The message was long and emotional. He started by saying he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said he knew he had handled everything badly. He said losing Grandpa Saul had hit him in ways he hadn't expected, and that he had made a panicked decision to leave because he couldn't face the grief. He said he should have been at the funeral. He said he was sorry for that, genuinely. Then in the 5th paragraph, and Ackles counted, he pivoted to his current situation. He said he was behind on rent and utilities. He said he was trying to find work but the job market was tough. He asked not for $500 now but for $1,500 to get him through the next month while he sorted things out. He said he would pay it back. He said their grandfather would have wanted them to take care of each other, and there it was again. Grandpa Saul used as leverage again. Ackles read the message 3 times. She felt the pull of it, felt the part of her that always wanted to fix things, always wanted to be the one who made the family whole, always wanted to earn the love she gave by being useful. She felt that pull the way you feel a familiar ache, with recognition and a kind of quiet sadness for the person you used to be before you learned better. She did not respond that night, she slept on it. In the morning she made coffee and sat at her kitchen table and wrote her response. She wrote it the way she had learned to write hard things, clearly, without cruelty, without apology for saying the truth. She wrote, "Marcus, I have read your message carefully. I can see that you are struggling and I do not want that for you. I also want to be honest with you about where I stand. I organized Grandpa Saul's funeral. I paid for his casket, his flowers, the reception, and every other expense that came with saying goodbye to him properly. I used my own credit card because there was no one else to use. You were not there. When you came back, the first thing you asked me about was money. I said no, not because I don't love you, but because I am not the answer to the consequences of your choices. What you do with your inheritance is your right. What I do with mine is my right. I am not going to cover your rent. I am not going to hold this against you as a person, but I am also not able to pretend that Grandpa Saul's name is a button someone can press to change my answer. I love you. I hope you find your footing." She did not say call me if you need to talk. She had learned that that kind of open door sometimes became an open window someone climbed through whenever they needed something. She sent the message and put her phone down. 2 hours later, Marcus responded with one line, "Wow." She looked at it and did not respond. What she had not told Marcus, and what she had told no one in the family yet, was that Gareth, the attorney, had called her again the week after the funeral with something she had not expected. He had explained that there was a secondary clause in Grandpa Saul's estate that she needed to know about. Beyond the divided savings, Grandpa Saul had left behind something he had never mentioned openly: a piece of property. Decades ago, before the carpentry shop, he had purchased a small piece of land on the outskirts of town, less than 2 acres, but valuable now because the area had developed significantly in the 30 years since he bought it. He had never built on it. He had just held it, paying the modest property taxes every year, the way a patient man holds something he believes in. He had left that property entirely to Ackles. Not to both of them, to Ackles alone. Gareth explained that the will was clear and unambiguous on this point. There was a handwritten note attached to the estate documents in Grandpa Saul's own handwriting, which Ackles recognized immediately from the birthday cards he had sent her every year without fail, that said simply, "The land goes to Ackles." She was always the one who showed up. "This is for that." That was all he had written, 8 words and a period. Ackles held the copy of that note in her hands for a long time. She cried, not performatively, not for an audience, but alone at her kitchen table with her coffee going cold, because it was the most clearly she had ever been seen by anyone in her family. All those Thursday afternoons, all those drives to the care facility, all the times she had shown up when she could have stayed home, he had seen every single one of them. He had not said anything grand about it while he was alive. He had simply written it down in his will in his own hand because he wanted to make sure it was permanent. She did not tell Marcus about the land right away. She was not trying to hide it maliciously. She was simply processing it herself, and she was also aware with painful clarity that his reaction to it would tell her everything she needed to know about who he was now. She found out he already knew within 10 days. Gareth had sent the formal estate documents to both parties as required by law, and those documents referenced the land and Ackles's designation as sole beneficiary. Marcus saw it, he called her. This call was different from the others. He did not lead with cheerfulness or pivot to his rent. He was immediately agitated. He said he didn't think it was fair. He said Grandpa Saul must have made that decision when he wasn't fully clear-minded. He said dividing the savings equally and then leaving her an additional piece of property was not equal treatment. He said the word unfair 3 times in the first 2 minutes of the call. Ackles listened to him say unfair while she remembered the empty seat at the funeral, while she remembered the Instagram story from the infinity pool, while she remembered the note in her grandfather's handwriting. She was always the one who showed up. She said Marcus, Grandpa Saul, was fully lucid when he wrote his will. His attorney confirmed that. She said, "He left you $70,000. He left me $70,000 in land that he chose to leave me specifically, and he explained why in his own words." She said, "I understand that feels unequal to you, but he got to decide what to do with what he built." She said it quietly and firmly. Marcus said he was going to talk to a lawyer. Ackles said that was his right. She was not going to negotiate over what Grandpa Saul had chosen. She was not going to feel guilty for being the one who showed up. Marcus said that she had always acted like she was better than him, always been the responsible one, always made him feel like the bad guy. She did not argue with that. She let him say it. When he finished, she said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." Then she said goodbye. She called Gareth after that and asked him directly, "Is the will challengeable?" He said that given Grandpa Saul's age, documented mental lucidity at the time of signing, and the clarity of the language, a challenge would be very difficult and unlikely to succeed. He said if Marcus wanted to pursue it, that was his option, but Gareth did not recommend it from his perspective. She thanked him. She took a quiet breath. She started looking into what the land was worth. The answer came from a local real estate consultant she had found through a friend. The consultant walked the property with her on a bright November morning, her breath fogging in the cold air, the land flat and quiet, surrounded by the newer developments that had slowly crept in from all sides over 30 years. The consultant's estimate: the land was worth between $180,000 and $220,000, depending on the buyer and the use. It was significantly more than anything else Grandpa Saul had left behind. Ackles stood on that land for a while after the consultant left. She thought about her grandfather buying it decades ago, a young carpenter with calloused hands and modest savings, standing on the same ground and deciding to hold it. She wondered if he had known then how it would grow. She wondered if he had ever imagined that someday he would leave it to a granddaughter who visited him every Thursday. She thought he probably hadn't imagined those specifics. But she thought he had known what he was doing when he wrote those 8 words. She decided not to sell immediately. She needed time to think, and she was not going to make a permanent decision from inside grief. She talked to Dara about it. She talked to a financial advisor who had been recommended by her company's employee resources program. She asked thoughtful questions and listened to the answers carefully and let herself be patient, the way Grandpa Saul had always been patient with things worth holding. Marcus filed a formal inquiry through an attorney. The letter arrived at Ackles' address in early December, a formal legal document from a local firm, requesting a review of the estate on the grounds of unequal distribution and potential undue influence. Ackles read it twice, feeling a complicated mix of feelings she allowed herself to have without judgment: sadness, anger, exhaustion, and underneath it all, a strange and soul. Clarity, she was not afraid of this. She was sad for what it said about Marcus, but she was not afraid. She forwarded the letter to Gareth. He handled the response, as was his job and his expertise. Gareth sent back a comprehensive document that included the full timeline of Grandpa Saul's estate planning, the medical records confirming his mental capacity at the time of signing, a statement from the signing witnesses, and a brief but clear explanation of the sole beneficiary clause. The letter essentially said, this decision was fully informed and any challenge will face significant legal headwind. It was professional and thorough. Ackles was glad she had a good attorney. The challenge did not proceed. Marcus's attorney, having reviewed Gareth's response, apparently advised him that he had no real grounds. The inquiry was dropped by mid-December. Ackles found out from Gareth with a brief phone call. She said thank you and hung up and went back to the work she had been in the middle of. Christmas came. The family gathered at Donna's house as they always had. Ackles went because Donna had asked her to and because this was going to be the first Christmas without Grandpa Saul and Donna was going to need her daughter there. Ackles brought food. She always brought food, something warm and made from scratch, because that was what she did. She arrived early because that was also what she did. She helped set the table, arrange the plates, lit the candles. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late. He came in quietly and went straight to the kitchen, not meeting her eyes right away. They moved around each other with a careful politeness that was nothing like the way siblings should be at Christmas. When they finally settled at the table and Donna asked Marcus to say something about Grandpa Saul, he did, and it was actually genuine. Ackles could hear that. He talked about how Grandpa Saul used to keep butterscotch candy in his shirt pocket and always offered it to everyone before himself. His voice went soft at the end. He missed him. Ackles believed that. She believed he had grieved in some way she hadn't seen. She also believed all the other things she knew to be true, and she was learning slowly at great effort to hold both at once without one erasing the other. She did not bring up the legal inquiry at the table. She did not bring up Bali. She ate dinner with her family and talked about things other than money, and she felt the particular ache of a holiday that has been changed by absence. They washed dishes side by side afterward, she and Marcus, with Donna putting things away between them, and nobody said anything difficult. It was not resolution. It was not forgiveness. It was just family in its complicated, imperfect reality, trying to share a kitchen on Christmas. The new year came. Ackles had decisions to make. She had been thinking about the land since October. She had asked questions, done research, sat with the numbers. She had also, in the quieter moments, thought about what Grandpa Saul had built in his life, not the land, not the savings, but the way he had built things. He had been a carpenter. He had made things with his hands that were meant to last. He had not built them to sell immediately. He had built them to be used, to be good, to do what they were supposed to do. She decided she was not going to sell the land. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. Instead, she was going to develop it. She had done enough research to know that the zoning allowed for small residential development, and she had found a contractor through a professional network who was experienced in small-scale builds. The plan was modest and careful. Build 3 small units on the property, 2 to rent as long-term residential housing and 1 to potentially use as a home studio or workspace. Since Ackles had been doing graphic design and brand consulting work on the side for years and had always wanted a proper space for it, the rental income from 2 modest units would cover the development loan payments comfortably. In 5 to 8 years, the whole thing would be generating real equity. It was a long game. It was exactly the kind of long game Grandpa Saul had played with the land in the first place. She told her mother about the plan over coffee in January. Donna listened and then said, quietly and without drama, that it sounded exactly like something Saul would have done. She said it with a kind of tenderness that held more meaning than she probably knew. Ackles reached across the table and held her mother's hand for a moment. That was enough. Marcus found out about the development plan through Donna, not because Donna was gossiping, but because Marcus had asked and Donna had no real reason to lie. He texted Ackles, not to fight this time, not to demand anything. The text said, I heard about what you're planning with the land. That's actually really smart. She sat with that text for a long time. It was not an apology. It was not the conversation they still needed to have, but it was something. It was the first thing he had said to her in months that was not about money or resentment or entitlement. She wrote back, "Thank you, that was all." She was not ready to open more than that, but she was not closing the door either. She met with the contractor in February. She signed the preliminary development agreement in March. She broke ground in April, which would have been Grandpa Saul's 80th birthday. She brought flowers to his grave that morning before the groundbreaking, just her alone in the quiet, and she talked to him the way she used to talk to him on Thursday afternoons. She told him about the land. She told him what she was building. She told him she was going to make it something that lasted. She thought he would have liked that. She believed, in the way you believe things that can't be proven but feel deeply true, that he had left it to her specifically because he had known she would. Spring came slowly and then all at once. The construction began on the 2 residential units, which the contractor estimated would take about 8 months to complete. Ackles drove by the site regularly, not obsessively, but with the attentiveness of someone watching something she is responsible for. She watched the foundation go in and thought about her grandfather buying this land when it was just open ground on the edge of a town that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. She watched the framing go up and thought about the oak table he had built in 1987 and the smell of cedar in winter. Her design work was going well. She had taken on 3 new clients in the new year, partly because she had more mental bandwidth now that she was not spending so much of it managing other people's emotions and absorbing the consequences of other people's choices. She had not thought of it explicitly that way until Dara pointed it out, sitting across from her at a coffee shop in April, saying, "You've done more creative work in the last 4 months than I've seen from you in 4 years." Ackles thought about that. Dara was right. She had been so focused on being dependable for everyone else that she had left very little energy for the things she actually wanted to build. That was the lesson, maybe, or one of them. It was not that family couldn't ask things of her. It was not that she should never help anyone. It was that she had been carrying other people's weight at the expense of her own foundation for so long that she had started to believe that was just her role, the one who holds things together, the one who shows up, the one who absorbs. And she had learned, slowly and painfully and through grief and rain and empty chairs at funerals and infinity pools on Instagram, that being the one who shows up should not also mean being the one who is taken advantage of for it. She thought about the note. She was always the one who showed up. Grandpa Saul had seen that and he had honored it. He had not celebrated it loudly while he was alive. He had just, when the moment came that he could do something about it permanently, done something about it. He had given her the land. He had seen her pattern and met it with a gift that matched its shape, patient, long-term, quiet, and worth more than it looked from the outside. In June, Marcus called again. The call was different. His voice was quieter. He said he had gotten a job, project management at a logistics company, steady work, decent salary, not glamorous but real. He said he was caught up on rent. He said he was doing better. He said he wanted to apologize properly for the funeral and for Bali and for the legal inquiry. He said he had thought about it for a long time and he knew that what he had done was wrong, not just bad timing or poor judgment but actually wrong, and that he was sorry. He said he was sorry specifically for missing the funeral, for the Instagram post, for asking her to cover his rent, for the legal letter, for using Grandpa Saul's name as leverage when he wanted something. He said each thing directly. Ackles sat in her kitchen and listened to him say each thing, and she felt the specific, complicated weight of being apologized to by someone you have loved and been hurt by for a very long time. She said, "I hear you, Marcus." She said, "Thank you for saying that directly." She said, "I am not going to pretend everything is fine immediately, but I do believe you mean it." She said, "I want us to have a real relationship, not a convenient one." He said he wanted that too. She said, "Then let's build that, slowly, honestly." He said, "Okay." She said, "Okay." That was not the end. It was also not the beginning. It was somewhere in the difficult, valuable middle, the place where 2 people who have hurt each other and been hurt try to figure out whether what they share is worth the work of rebuilding it. Ackles did not know yet how it would go. She was not naive enough to think. One honest phone call resolved years of pattern. But she was open enough to believe that people could change, even people who had disappointed her badly, if they chose to be honest about it and do the actual work. She was not going to rush it. She had learned to be patient with things worth holding. The units were completed in December, just past the 1-year mark of Grandpa Saul's death. Ackles signed her first tenant agreement in the week before Christmas, a young couple who were quiet and kind and excited about the space. She sat in her car after they left with the signed paperwork in her hand, and thought about everything that year had held: the grief and the betrayal, and the rain at the graveside, and the Instagram story, and the credit card bill, and the note in her grandfather's handwriting, and the groundbreaking on his birthday, and the phone call with Marcus and the tenants, who had just signed a lease for something she had built on land that he had trusted her with. She thought about what she would tell people if they asked what the year had taught her. She thought she would say this: loyalty is not the same as accepting mistreatment. Showing up for people you love is not the same as making yourself available to be used. And the person who always keeps the peace is often the person who is silently paying for everyone else's war. Grandpa Saul had seen who she was when she didn't think anyone was watching. That was the gift, not just the land, the being seen. Ackles sat in her car in the cold December evening, the signed lease in her hand, and she allowed herself to feel something she had not fully allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Proud, not proud in a loud or boastful way. Proud in the quiet, solid way of someone who did the right thing when it would have been easier not to, who held her ground when the pressure to fold was real, who built something lasting out of grief and loss and complicated family love. She was 32 now. She was just getting started. She drove home and made dinner and called Dara and talked for an hour about nothing important and laughed at something stupid and felt, underneath all of it, a deep and steady okay. Not perfect, not resolved, not free of complicated family feelings or grief or the long, slow work of figuring out who she wanted Marcus to be in her life now. But okay. Genuinely, solidly, quietly okay, and that was enough. That was more than enough. Before you close this video, I want to leave you with one question that this story kept bringing me back to. Grandpa Saul did not make a big speech about who showed up and who didn't. He did not call anyone out or create drama or take sides in family arguments. He just paid attention quietly for decades, and then when the moment came, he put what he had built into the hands of the person who had earned it. No announcement, no confrontation, just 8 words and a deed. So I want to ask you, who in your life shows up without being asked? Who is doing the quiet work that no one is celebrating? If that person is you, I want you to know that someone sees it. And if you have someone like that in your life, don't wait for a will to tell them. Leave a comment below and tell me, would you have answered the door when Marcus came back? What would you have done differently than Ackles? And if this story hit close to home, you already know why. Stay strong. You deserve to be seen.